Today we publish a white paper on immigration, a strategy absolutely central to my plan for change that will finally take back control of our borders. Between 2019 and 2023, net migration quadrupled until in 2023 it reached nearly 1 million. That's about the population of Birmingham, our second largest city. That's not control, it's chaos. A one-nation experiment in...
Keir Starmer walked in expecting a calm, courteous debate, the kind where everyone nods politely and pretends they're listening. But that fantasy evaporated the moment Aunt Middleton burst onto the scene like a bearded human wrecking ball. 1 second Starmer was serenely outlining policy bullet points. The next he was being spiritually escorted out of the room with his dignity in a carrier bag. She didn't just beat him, she atomized him, shredding his authority into pure political confetti and scattering it across the floor for everyone to laugh at. So what exactly triggered this verbal detonation? And why does Keir Starmer now visibly twitch whenever someone even whispers the word sass? Stick around, because this takedown is louder, uglier and messier than Boris Johnson's hair caught in a Category 5 hurricane.
I know about politics. I know enough about modern day politics to realise that it's not working here in the UK. Hence, the solution is in the title, reform. Political reform is definitely needed, and it doesn't take the brains of Elon Musk to realise that. What do I know? Now, I do know about national security. I do know about safety. I do know about personal safety. I do know about community. I do know about teamwork.
It started like any other painfully dull week in the political swamp, with Keir Starmer presumably pressing another beige tie and polishing his mastery of the ancient art of not actually deciding anything, when suddenly, from somewhere beyond the fog of broken promises, the heavy, ominous thud-off. Combat boots began to echo. This was not routine Westminster noise. This was a warning. Aunt Middleton had officially entered the chat, and from the moment she did, it was abundantly clear that someone, very specifically Starmer, was moments away from being completely, mercilessly and publicly shredded.
But listen, what I do know is national security, and that's what we're going to touch on very first and foremost. Now, when I spoke to Nigel and the wider team a couple of years ago, for those that don't know, I do a TV show called SAS, Who Dares Wins, where I bring in broken people and I strip them down so they can identify who they are, so they have an identity, and then I build them back up to go out into the world and to achieve. And I got asked a question by Nigel and his wider team saying, could you do that with a broken country? How do you do that? And we went through how I broke people down.
For anyone still blissfully out of the loop, Aunt Middleton isn't your average social media gobshite firing hot takes from a sofa. This is a man who's climbed mountains, led elite military units on missions where mistakes get people killed, and somehow survived British reality TV without strangling. A producer, so when he talks about leadership, he doesn't mean rearranging chairs in a committee room. He means dragging yourself across a battlefield on a shattered leg, because quitting simply isn't on the menu. And when this former Special Forces powerhouse took one long look at the state of British politics and clocked Keir Starmer staring awkwardly into the abyss like a man who's lost his notes and his nerve, he had opinions, loud ones, sharp ones, and charged with the kind of military-grade anger that doesn't ask permission before detonating.
Lost my identity, I got confused. When you have a nation of confused people, guess what happens after? Frustration. You get frustrated. Like the individual, very much like the individual. What happens after frustration? Anger. Anger, violence. Violence. What's happening on our streets right now? Violence. Or it teeters into civil unrest, which we want to avoid at all costs.
To suggest Ant went easy would be like suggesting Keir Starmer occasionally stumbles across a backbone while looking for his notes. Because this wasn't a gentle critique so much as a heat-seeking missile locking onto the soggy sponge cake currently posing as Labour's leader. Ant didn't simply question Starmer's leadership credentials, he dismantled them piece by piece, hurled the remains into a trench, and then bellowed at them for being late, unprepared, and fundamentally unfit for the realities of basic training, let alone the brutal demands of actual leadership.
I'm not going to avoid any taxes. I'm going to come away from the way that he runs the country. He's got no ambition, he's got no drive, and he's just off-putting. I'm going to spend my time between Dubai and Spain. You know, I'm not going there to try and save money. I won't have an income coming from the UK, so you know I don't need to be here. And
what is it about? But Labour have only been in for I think 2 months. So what have they done so catastrophically wrong?
Well, you're talking about the next budget of what they're going to start rising.
Let's rewind for a moment, because to really appreciate the impact of this takedown, you first have to understand what Keir Starmer actually brings to the leadership table. And spoiler alert, it isn't leadership. This is the man who handled Brexit like someone ordering tapas, with crippling commitment issues. Turning you turns into a full-blown art form. 1 minute championing nationalisation, the next watering it down like a budget cocktail at a dry wedding. A man who, when asked a straight question, responds with a 14-minute dissertation that inevitably limps to the immortal conclusion. We're exploring options. But Ant Middleton doesn't explore options. He executes plans. And he has absolutely zero tolerance for political theatre, grey-suited hesitation, or that painfully earnest tone that achieves nothing beyond wasting oxygen. So when Ant finally unloaded it, wasn't just an angry, bearded rant. It was a full indictment delivered with surgical contempt. A punchline stomped in with combat boots, carving Starmer a brand new political identity as the sort of bloke who, dropped into a military operation, would spend 45 minutes forming a committee to name the mission before, retreating the second the enemy fired off a few mean tweets. Because as Middleton reminded everyone with brutal clarity, leadership is about standing tall while everything collapses around you, not politely adjusting your lapel pin while waiting for polling advisors to tell you how to feel.
Abused on a regular basis, and I see it on a regular basis, and it infuriates me.
And you have that split second of, am I going to act? Am I not going to act? And that delay is what people see.
Does politics influence the police force?
That's a really good question, because I'm just a lowly DS, you know, on CID.
Listen, you can't hide here, Mark. Come on, I know you know more.
The media it makes the police and it breaks the police.
Yes, there's going to be bad apples. There always is in any organisation. Yes, we're going to make mistakes. We're only human.
People see that tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
The internet reacted exactly as you'd expect, with pure, unfiltered glee and enough memes to power the next 4 general elections. Because watching Keir Starmer get flattened by Ant Middleton wasn't just entertaining, it felt oddly necessary, like a verbal defibrillator Britain didn't realise it needed, as TikTok instantly flooded with clips of Ant's blunt, no-nonsense truths laid over footage of Starmer blinking like a man who's just lost his turn in an endless game of political charades, while Twitter briefly rebranded itself as an unofficial Ant Middleton fan club, and even people who hadn't followed politics since Tony Blair's haircut was front-page news started asking, wait, why is this man in charge of anything? Which is fair, because Starmer has the inspirational aura of a middle manager at a stationary convention, handling every crisis as if he's apologising for a late invoice. And then, in strides Middleton, all clarity and controlled fury, calmly pointing out that Britain's supposed alternative leader couldn't walk a dog through a park without convening a focus group to overthink the leash. And the contrast was savage, because one of these men has led people into situations where a single wrong move means someone doesn't come home, while the other struggles to lead a sentence without first checking how it polls.
Today was Sir Keir Starmer's worst day as Prime Minister. He's currently so toxic that polonium looks at him and runs away. The latest poll put Reform about 10 points ahead, and he's lost the Red Wall. So his team of crack advisors said, go to the Red Wall, win them back, slag off Nigel Farage. They'll love that, Sir Keir. Here's what happened.
I've got Peter from The Guardian.
Do you think one of the problems is that Nigel Farage can approximate talking like a human being, where you just resort to talking points and dodging questions?
He's lost the game.
The other one, Starmer, visibly wilts the moment someone dares ask whether he actually supports striking nurses, and Middleton's point went far beyond individual policies or the chronic lack of them, cutting straight to the core problem, an alarming absence of conviction, leadership without courage, direction without meaning, politics with no heartbeat. And it landed hard because it rang painfully true, as Britain isn't just exhausted by scandals and sleaze, but drained by emptiness itself. The vague slogans, the lukewarm statements, the corporate-style answers to deeply human problems. So when Ant Middleton stormed in with a verbal roundhouse kick aimed squarely at the solar plexus of mediocrity, people cheered, both figuratively and literally, and almost instantly the internet began replaying Starmer's greatest non-hits, from the moment he sort of supported strikes until someone important frowned, to the green policy announcement that floated in and out like a holiday ghost, to his relentless attempt to be everything to everyone, which usually ends with him being absolutely nothing to anyone.
Johnson had more of a quite a Johnsonian response. He did quite a long post on X, but I think the most intriguing part of that was, "To take care is the orange ball chewing manacled gimp of Brussels."
The orange ball chewing?
Orange ball chewing manacled gimp of Brussels is how he described Keir Starmer. He said, most bizarrely of all, he's agreed that Britain will once again be paying countless millions of pounds into EU coffers for the privilege of becoming the non-voting punk of the EU Commission.
It's a great sentence. You've got to give it to him.
He's got away with words.
Memes wasted no time recasting him as a ghost, a mannequin, even a cardboard cutout with a giant 404 error stamped across its forehead. Because Ant Middleton wasn't just mocking a man, he was exposing the hollow space at the heart of His Majesty's most hesitant opposition and what made the roast. Almost poetic was that Middleton has never pretended to be a politician, he isn't polished, and thank God for that, he speaks like someone who's faced real consequences, rather than someone carefully cushioning every sentence to keep donors comfortable. Blunt, and occasionally abrasive, but unmistakably authentic, which in modern politics is rarer than a Starmer promise that survives a full news cycle. And the real beauty was how utterly outmatched Starmer looked without even being in the room. As if Middleton's opinion alone was a grenade lobbed into a council meeting about which font to use on Labour posters, leaving even committed centrists quietly admitting Starmer seemed soft. Not just because of what was said, but because of what was missing. No fire, no conviction, no sense he could handle anything tougher than a mild grilling on breakfast television. And in that vacuum, every word Middleton spoke echoed even louder.
And then I got a phone call from my agency saying, Ant, your whole world's about to turn upside down in about 45 minutes to an hour. I said, what do you mean? And then that 45 minutes an hour came around. The Sun, the Mirror, the Daily Mail, all had these in place promptu sort of articles coming out. Ant Middleton's been fired by Channel 4. Ant Middleton, fired because of BLM tweet. Ant Middleton fired because of teen tweet, pandemic tweet. That's what it was all about first.
The real sting wasn't the insults themselves. It was the implication that Keir Starmer couldn't even shepherd a group of toddlers across a soft play area without drafting a 5-point plan, commissioning a risk assessment, and pausing halfway through for a stakeholder meeting. Because Middleton wasn't just listing flaws, he was sketching the exact kind of leader people are desperate to escape from. Calculated, cautious, painfully vanilla, with a faint aftertaste of beige, and it didn't stop as a roast, but morphed into something closer to a rallying cry, with people suddenly asking out loud what sort of leadership they actually want. Whether they really want a speech-generating mannequin that looks like it wandered out of an HR seminar, or someone who takes responsibility, owns decisions, and actually leads. Because that's the point where Ant Middleton's verbal dropkick to Starmer's dignity veers into something much bigger than a celebrity mouthing off on a talk show, becoming a mirror held up to a nationwide midlife crisis, as Britain reveals itself not just tired, but politically burnt out, emotionally unmoored, pacing the kitchen at 2 a.m, wondering how it ended up with leaders who couldn't motivate a toddler to finish a juice box, let alone guide an entire country. Middleton's outburst hit a raw nerve, the kind people scream into their steering wheels during rush hour. Is anyone actually in charge? Who knows what they're doing? While politicians juggle press conferences and worry about studio lighting, Ant Middleton has led people through enemy territory in pitch-black silence, carrying real responsibility. So when he looks at Starmer and effectively says, "That bloke couldn't lead ants to a picnic," it lands deep. This isn't about left versus right. It's about a political class that increasingly feels like it's staffed by human filing cabinets, tidy, cautious, emotionally distant, and useful about once a year.